Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Great Lakes Green Chemistry and the Great Lakes Green Chemistry Network and Michigan Green Chemistry Clearinghouse monthly webinar. We're very happy to have you here today, and we're really looking forward to our presentation by Terry Collins from Carnegie Mellon University. So let's get right to it. Today's presentation is called Building the Chemical Dimension of a Sustainable Civilization. It's part one of what we hope will be a couple of presentations on this subject. And part one is called The Compass and the Code. And our presenter is someone who is well known to people in the green chemistry community, Terry Collins from Carnegie Mellon University and the Green Science Institute there. And he is the Teresa Heinz Professor of Green Chemistry at Carnegie Mellon Institute. So I'm not going to give him much more of an introduction than that because I think most people know about all of the, he's also a Heinz, the winner of the Heinz Award for his accomplishments in environmental work and green chemistry. So I'm just going to turn it over to him so that he'll have lots of time to make his presentation. And again, I really encourage you to ask questions and make comments because we will give you that opportunity after his talk is finished. Terry?
Thank you very much indeed, Lynn. It's a great pleasure to be here, and so I'll get right into the talk. So when we think about sustainability, one has to first pause and consider the current state of sustainability of our civilization. And so what follows is some of the major signals that we are in serious trouble with sustainability. And I'll ask the question of you, rhetorically almost, if you think of America as the leader of the world. That's the question. And the world, if you do so think of America as the leader of the world over which America is presiding has these signatures of its unsustainability. So first of all, the well-known increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations that are altering the planet's climate. The fact that the oceans are being poisoned, killed, heated, acidified, and filled, all dramatically. The fact that biodiversity is being devastated. The fact that the human population has outgrown the planetary capacity. The fact that the familiar water cycle is collapsing. The fact that the low-dose effects of some everyday chemicals are degrading the nature of life itself, perhaps irreversibly. This is the area of endocrine disruption. And the fact that the abuse of nature is unleashing deadly infectious diseases because of the way we conduct agricultural practices. Now that's a set of some of the most serious sustainability crises that we actually have. And so it leads then to one to sit back and contemplate and just ask some real big questions. And these are questions for you. Do you believe the technological dimension of our civilization is sustainable? I certainly don't, based on those last criteria. And if not, the implications of this are huge. Huge for all of us, huge for everything. Now just remember that the first definition of sustainable development from the Brundtland Commission, 1987, postulated that sustainable, or asserted that sustainable development was this. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And so as I sit here in Pittsburgh, in the almost capital city of the current expansion in gas, what I see is everybody handling the first part pretty well, meeting the needs of the present. The really tough part of this definition is without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I don't think we know how to do that. I don't think as a civilization we thought it through. I don't think our universities are doing a good job of of working on it to understand it. On the whole, there are some fabulous people out there doing their absolute best, but it's not really taken hold of us that this is the huge challenge of our time, of our generation. Remember also that, because that definition is very widely quoted, it's the opening statement on a very large piece of discourse about sustainability. And the very next statements are that sustainable development contains within it two key concepts. The concept of needs, in particular the essential needs of the world's poor, to which overriding priority should be given. If you sit and think about it, and if you're really honest with yourself, a lot of what we do in development pays very little attention to the world's poor. And the idea of the limitations imposed by the state of technology and social organization on the environment's ability to meet present and future needs. Now, I think these guys were really insightful. I think this is really clever. So if you really look at our technologies and think about the problems that they have with respect to sustainability, the technologies are really imposing serious limitations because and the way we have our civilization structured is imposing these limitations on our ability to change to meet sustainability challenges. Secondly, do you believe that you have an individual responsibility to promote the development of sustainable technologies and a sustainable economy? There'll be many technocrats on the phone here. The question then, and many of you will know the answer to this question, I'm posing it rhetorically to everybody. If so, what does it mean for you? What will you do? How does it change your life? 3, do you believe that your institution, whatever it is, has a responsibility to promote the development of sustainability? If so, how can whatever it is honor this responsibility? Now, there's a huge amount of talk about sustainability in, for example, universities. But where the rubber meets the road, where you sit and you look in a very hard-nosed way at what we are doing and how that's affecting sustainability and how we often turn blind eyes because, at the issues that are hard to look at. My estimation is that universities are currently doing a terrible job of rising to the challenges of sustainability. Don't these challenges mean that for the good of all life, we must do our best to change many directions in the technological and other dimensions of our civilization? Again, when you look and think of America as the leader of the world, if you think that way, you have to ask that the hard question is present-day leadership up to this phenomenal task. The phenomenal task, of course, of backing off those terrible things that are happening, as I said at the beginning of the webinar. The idea of direction is extremely important. So if you ask yourself, what will a sustainable civilization actually look like? I mean, we can get certain things and we can assert certain things, well, it'll clearly be this and that, but we won't know exactly what it'll look like until we get there. Sustainability is not an endpoint. It's not a place out in time with particular characteristics. It's more, operationally anyway, about the direction you're heading in than it is about where you are. So we can look at our current set of challenges, again the ones I introduced, and say where we are is in a terrible place. The question is, where do we head from here to deal with that understanding? And the idea of a compass is really important here. So this is a sustainability compass that I designed to try to help people to think about these very tough questions without berating them about the gravity of the challenges. And the lines of thought, I think very highly of Stephen Covey's books, for example, First Things First, where he discusses the compass and the clock and that tension between those in American professional life. And I think very highly of my Carl Henrik Robert, a very good friend of mine, who is the designer of or the inventor, if you like, of the natural step and the principles of the natural step. And what Carl-Henric will tell you is that technologies conspire against sustainability in one of two ways. If you look to the right of the compass, you either by physically or chemically degrading the environment. That's the first. And it gives rise to a compass needle. And the compass needle could, for any given technology, be pointing due north, or it could be pointing due south. If we look at the energy technologies that we rely most upon, coal and oil, they're clearly pointing towards unsustainability in no uncertain circumstances. And so in this situation, of course, we sit and think, well, how can we design, develop, or change to a safer and ameliorating technology that isn't coal or oil, and what are we doing? We're going to natural gas and shale oil. If they move the needle at all, it's not very much. One could argue for a very long time and run all sorts of analyses about where the needles exactly point for any given technology, but I'm pretty sure that you can understand that guessing the octant, at least, of the compass for any given technology is a relatively straightforward thing to do. By comparison, if you look at the renewable technologies of solar, thermal, wind, photovoltaic, and geothermal, these, to the best of my understanding anyway, do not physically and chemically degrade the environment in a heavy-duty way, as with the technologies at the bottom. So this means surely that over time we will move, as has been done in various countries, as I'll discuss later, we will move our energy technology in that direction. The second thing is that technologies poison the environment as a way of making the civilization unsustainable. And clearly coal is a heavy-duty poisoner of the environment. Again, the technologies that we're bringing out to replace it bring very little relief there. What we want, again, is to move in this direction towards solar, thermal, wind, photovoltaic, and geothermal, where there are some toxicity issues with some of them, but relatively minor in comparison to the enormous release of CO2, the release of mercury, the release of toxic chemicals to the air, etc. There's a bigger needle which integrates both. If the orange needle was pointing due north, that big needle would lie on the purple needle. In this situation, it looks a bit like that. So that is the integrated needle for any given technology that you would be looking at. Now, it would be wonderful if in the energy area the compass looked like this, but it does not. It looks like this. We, by the choices we're making with energy, are conspiring against the future good. Nuclear has a different unsustainable compass profile, which is much easier to talk about after Fukushima, although certainly many people, including myself, were doing that before Fukushima. So if the idea is that we need to move the compass needles from where they are, pointing to the south, pointing to the north, I, of course, come from the southern hemisphere, so I'll put unsustainable down there. How much does our inability to move to renewables arise from technical, cultural, or political forces? And so there's another way to look at this compass. And this is a short movie. And so we have a simplified compass. And then we have a guy coming in from the left who's big, tough, and strong. He's got lots of money. And we got a guy coming in from the right who looks about the same, but he's not got nearly as much money. And really what's happening is the guy on the left is pulling up on the tail of the needle, and the guy on the right is pushing up on the head. We need the guy on the right to win in this classic battle for sustainability. This picture is dominated by the fact, so for example, the guy on the left in Pennsylvania anyway is natural gas and coal. The guy on the right is renewables. That could be projected across the entire world. This is all dominated by the fact that the guy on the left has most of the money. He can afford a lot of power, and in this country, he sure buys it. This is the guy that, for sustainability, has to win. If the guy on the left wins, we literally cannot have a sustainable civilization. If the guy on the right wins, There's every reason to believe that we can. So this is actually marketplace competition where renewables are looking very, very good actually. It's scientific engagement. Renewables will only get better, and you can improve natural gas extraction, but you cannot get over the fact that this is a CO2 releaser, a major CO2 releaser. You can't get over the fact that the tar sands of Alberta are major CO2 releases. In fact, there's enough carbon there to close the gap between 400 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere where we are now and 450. It's a political tournament par excellence, and it's a public opinion contest. And it's all dominated, in my opinion, by the money, the fact that the guy on the left has most of it. But he does not have to cost account the injuries he's inflicting on the future. All of those things that we talked about at the beginning are nearly all of them are tied heavily to our reliance on carbon energy. He externalizes the health and environmental costs. So what we have now with energy is that most money is steering America and the world down deadly unsustainable paths. Good sense, goodness itself, and the future good are all trapped in this unfortunate dynamic. We function very much as social creatures. Our countries are social organizations. But when it comes to sustainability, the opinion that really matters is the opinion of Mother Nature. Mother Nature will tell you what she thinks through science, but she will not negotiate with you. You can't say to Mother Nature, well, if I'm a good boy here and do a little bit better with that, will you let me get away with being a bad boy over there? This does not happen. Mother Nature will react in ways that we can understand very clearly through science, and we have to listen to that. So, every time, the way I look at it in Pittsburgh is when the gas producers are making $1, I just see that as negative dollars to the future, 10, 100, 1,000. I don't know how big it is. But, we're looking at disappearing islands in the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. We're looking at very low-lying countries that are threatened by ocean rise, those islands obviously, but much bigger countries, including, I always think of Bangladesh, which is about the size of Pennsylvania with nearly 150 million people on it, and most of it is at a very low elevation. I think of Denmark, I think of Holland, and I think of large parts of the United States, which just on the ocean rise frontier look to be in perilous position, as we've been told by many leaders of climate change. This is a video that you can go and look at. It's from Gas Rush Stories. There's a whole set of them there. This is the one on renewable energy, and I'm very proud to be part of that. So we often find with companies, at least when I look at them, the bigger polyglot chemical companies, for example, that they really are doing a lot of things to try to advance sustainability. But they're also doing things or expanding things that are clearly not sustainable. And you have to ask if there can be a good place in history for chemical companies of today that are developing behind the face of Janus, the two-faced Greek mythological figure, advancing sustainable technologies while also expanding unsustainable ones. Can Mother Nature and the future really be fooled by PR? I don't think they can. But we have this dynamic, and it's a serious problem. This brings us to the thought of negotiating with the future, because this is something we haven't even begun to do. Here's the present that comes in and sits down at the negotiating table. When it comes to the future, who's he going to negotiate with? Well, it's a phantom, isn't it? Those people don't exist. And the only way they can have a good future is if existing human beings come and speak for them, the person standing with his hands on the shoulder of the phantom, and the woman walking into the room. And these people are many people that I know and admire greatly in today's world. There are also famous figures from the past, Rachel Carson being the woman, for example, and any number of men that have stepped up and tried to interpret and do their best for the future, and really speaking for the people of the future. Now, it's not all bad news. There, in the energy space, I greatly admire Germany, which is running well above 20% in renewable energy, and I'm told that on a sunny day in Germany, half the grid is photovoltaic. That's a major effort of that country to really, in my opinion, do the right thing for the future. And Denmark, which has invested so heavily in wind energy and has so much of its electric grid coming from wind energy. And Italy is expanding substantially in the solar energy space. And the city of Seville in Spain has become a renewable energy city, a completely renewable energy city. These are wonderful things to be watching. In the university, when we bring young people in to train them to think about the future, one of our big problems is that we train them to be experts. We take them down drill holes, and as we do that, we forget other things. I firmly believe if you're going to be a great scientist, you have to go down a deep drill hole and learn about the exquisite details and the high technical skills of a certain thing. But that's not what we should be thinking about. We need to come out of our drill holes with great regularity. Karl-Heinrich Robert talks beautifully about drill holes. And look at what's going on at the surface and go and look down the other drill holes and talk to the people down there and say, hey, you're doing something that I know is important for what I'm doing. And if we both work together, we can presumably promote sustainability in a better way and deal with those storms that you see coming down on our civilization. Now, if you think about America, it's really a group of people that are very much characterized by their occupations. And I've noticed this, that people with certain backgrounds think in certain ways. Even inside science, you'll hear this regularly, that the chemist who makes things will say, well, toxicology, that the toxicity properties of the things that I make are not my concern. That's someone else's job. You'll hear that very regularly. And that projects right across our civilization. And so there are all these different groups of specialists. And when the country sets about to consider something or make a decision on something, various of these groups, depending on the issue, become involved. And then when it gets to the point of a impasse, these guys come in and tell us how it's going to be. And that's always happens when advocates for one other or other side of a particular issue first speak to them and they hear the case, so to speak. Now, this is what we do in America, and when these guys make their decision, that's it. And if you think about it, the rest of the world reacts to what America is doing. It either decides to follow America, which many of the countries do, or it decides not to follow America purely because it is America going in this direction. Some countries do that. But the net result is these are all the countries of the world. They're all very substantially influenced by what goes on in the United States. The problem with this picture is that the voice of nature is clearly not being heard well enough. Apparently the Supreme Court or the people arguing before them in various cases do not understand enough about the environmental record, or otherwise surely they would be doing something differently. If Mother Nature is frowning on this whole exercise, we're in trouble, and as I said right at the beginning of the talk, Mother Nature is clearly frowning on this exercise. So to return then to the overview of the sustainability crisis, how did it all happen? I mean, you know, when you realize it has happened and it is continuing to happen, it just seems like a nightmare. And you ask yourself, well, who's responsible for this? Being a member of a university, one I consider to be a truly great university and to be one I consider to be very privileged to be part of, we have to, though, ask ourselves, how can we reinvent the university to cope with sustainability? Because we clearly aren't doing a good job. we train the leaders of the civilization. And if the leaders of the civilization are producing the picture of the sustainability crises, we're clearly not doing a good job. We have to think about how to reinvent ourselves. And one of the thoughts, and this is after just many years of pondering this and being involved in all kinds of struggles over toxicity, where I personally had to learn about the toxicity and then try to interpret it for my fellow green chemists and my fellow colleagues in chemistry. And of course, when it comes to issues like endocrine disruption, you really are running up against large amounts of investment and questioning the wisdom of continuing to pursue that particular line of the economy. And so it's stressful. But I ask myself, when I think about who's responsible and how did it happen, what principles should students be taught in the modern university today so that they'll be equipped to do a better job than the incumbent generation has done? And this brings me to something I've been developing for a long time, and I will publish with a group of friends, called the Code of Sustainability Ethics. So leaders of sustainability, in my personal experience, if you aspire to really impact sustainability in a very big way, you're going to work your tail off. First of all, if you're a scientist, you're going to have to dedicate your life to learning and pursuing what sustainability requires. Now, when you come to Carnegie Mellon, if you're a scientist, we're going to put these ideas that permeate the different disciplines of science into your head. You'll be focused on some of them more than others, but you're going to get a taste of nearly all of them. And then we'd graduate. You would say, okay, you know all that stuff. Now you're a bachelor, you're a master, you're a doctor. Go out and do your stuff. It's not enough. We have to put in the other critical things about sustainability and about how what technocrats do impact the environment and particularly impact the welfare of the future. You're a dangerous beast if you don't understand those things. We need to help you to understand those. And I know from personal experience with students at Carnegie Mellon that they really do want to integrate this stuff into their professional lives. The second thing is, if you look at the situation we're in, it's an indictment of current peer groups. There's no escaping that. It's an indictment of current leadership. And so peer review systems are kind of hard because to handle sustainability in, because you basically get the resources to operate from groups of people who are very, very much represent the system in the way it is. If you accept right at the beginning that the system is the problem and it has to be adapted in a kind and loving way, not in a beat it down and kick it in the shins or wherever sort of way. But if you accept that, really, you will take your mind to the fact that you have to seek the honor and respect of future generations as the premier tribute to your life's work. You can't worry about what peers are thinking if they've not got their head into the sustainability space in the right way. You've just got to press on anyway. Teaching sustainability is not an endpoint, but a direction that can be logically identified and realistically followed by everyone. I think if you look at the compass, it's fairly easy to see that it makes a lot of sense. It's about the direction. Probably one of the saddest things that's happening in our time is that we're losing so much of the richness of life on this planet. Again, because of what the technology choices that we are making, we have made, and we are continuing to expand that are unsustainable. And so really we all have a role to play in championing biodiversity and doing everything that's needed to sustain it. And so, for example, simply moving the energy space to renewables certainly helps with ocean creatures and all sorts of other things with their sustainability. Teach that a money first in all things, civilization will perish from the earth. The problem is that when you come to technologies, there are 4 critical performances. There is the technical performance, which we're all, when we go buy a fancy car, we all know about that. There's the cost performance. That's a very important thing. I wouldn't for a minute say it wasn't important. But what are not wrapped in, almost invariably, not always, but almost invariably, to the advancement of technology are the environmental performance and the health performance. These are externalized. In other words, they're the companies making money on cost and technical performance are expecting someone else to pay for health and environmental performance. I just saw a presentation by Prince Charles emphasizing that the polluter should pay. This is one way to start changing the picture and putting a flesh back on the skeleton's face of the dollar. This is not about protesting. It's about when you're teaching students. It's about, although protest is a very important thing when things aren't right, but it's about working to make jobs, wealth, and sustainability mutually reinforcing. That's the hugely wonderful challenge, and I firmly believe this can be done. 7, oppose the denial of sustainability problems. When, for whatever reason, people are saying issues that, or saying things that you clearly understand to be absolutely wrong, you have to stand up and be counted. Always resist the distortion of science at the expense of the common good. It sounds like it's a little bit different from the last one. When science is distorted to try to get a particular outcome, by either side of any particular scientific debate, whenever that happens, sustainability is injured. The common good is injured. Never devalue sustainability for money, tribute, or political support. Now, in my class in green chemistry, I teach a great deal about the history of the lead and chlorine industries. And you can clearly see people who are selling out for money, tribute, and political support. It needs to be taught to students what damage that does to the American people, to the world, when the phenomenal damage that occurs when that happens. And the last of all of these is this is tough. Sustainability is tough territory. Not only is it highly multidisciplinary, but I pretty much believe that no university, at least none that I know of, has all of the right sorts of intellectuals all working in resonance to try to advance the sustainability of the university large. And so what one ends up doing is really looking to the whole world to find the people who you can trust to, first of all, to never break with sustainability for any reason, and also to lead it. And these people, one of the great privileges of my career has been to meet many of these people and to in some cases, begin collaborating and working with them. And you need one of these, in my opinion, also, because when you need to go home and cry on the shoulder of somebody or something, one of these is always good to have. Wives are good too, but one of these is really good to have. So my work is being funded by a lot of different sources over the years. I particularly want to thank the Heinz endowments who made it possible for me to do things in a very different sort of way at Carnegie Mellon. This is the city of Pittsburgh from the top of its tallest building. Truly wonderful city to live in. Its reputation as America's most livable city is absolutely deserved. And so my family and I, we love being here. And it's a city that's famous for the environment, if you think about it. Rachel Carson grew up about 10 miles from where I live, and we have Teresa Heinz as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Terry. That was, I think, a very provocative presentation and very interesting, and I'm hoping that there will be a lot of questions and discussion. Do you feel that the majority of civilization believes that man is part of the ecosystem or exists outside of the ecosystem, anthropocentric view? If the latter, how do you propose we alter that faulty thinking?
So I do think it's the latter. I sort of view us as a little bit like, you know, it depends on how you program the computer, a little bit like computers. It depends on what code you put in there. I see education as the answer to escaping that. And I don't discount anybody or the value of anybody in this education, in the educational exercise and the rethinking that has to go on. And of course, it's controversial and it's hard to get people to change their mind. But I do think that by producing very high quality or assets or educational material, that we will be able to deal with this better. And so some of these things on exactly the issue of anthropocentricity already exists. So education.
I'd like to stick something in that I'm probably going out on a limb, but I teach part of this. I teach an issue that's very related to this in my classes, and one of the things that I teach my students is that it's very interesting to look historically at the cultural, the historical and cultural institutionalization of ideas in Western religion, because they're very clear coming down, you know, in the history of Western religion that teaches sort of contradictory ideas in the Bible that either man has complete dominion over the earth, or, depending on how you interpret it, that man is the shepherd of the earth or has responsibility to take care of the earth. But I think that one of the issues that we have to deal with is a deep cultural belief that stems from that if humans have dominion over the planet, that they do stand outside of the ecosystem. And I think that that's something that I agree with Terry is something that really needs to be looked at, and people need the education and to be challenged intellectually about that. Now, I'm not talking about challenging people's religious beliefs, but just to bring up that whole question for people to think about. So the next question is...
Other people might like to comment on that, but so I do not discount religion as being very important in addressing sustainability. And there's much evidence around that people are really trying. So, for example, there's a very good Bill Moyers program called God is Green, and it's quite inspiring. It talks about ministers, largely Protestant, of the Protestant faith, that are that are spending a great deal of time working with their congregations to advance really what is sustainability thinking, and they're doing very well of it, and they're basing it on material that they find in the Bible, and this can, in my opinion, only be a good thing.
Yeah. The next question is, as a fellow educator, should one guideline also be to always find common ground with those who don't agree with our sustainable assumptions, then find better ways to communicate sustainable principles to them and with them?
So the presentation is arguably fairly aggressive on that point. So absolutely always try to find common ground. If the pursuit of money above all other things is, for example, is seen as the problem, you at least have to clearly point out that you believe that to be the problem, and then go and try to find out, well, how do we make the pursuit of money more compatible with a sustainable future? Really, if you think about it, the main point of green chemistry. And so when one is dealing with this territory, it's very tough territory. That's a hard question to answer, because when I think about myself and interacting with people who appear to be presenting a very different point of view, I do like to know who I'm talking to. And so, you know, is this somebody who's talking personally from their heart? Is this a representative of a company that has serious sustainability problems? Is this someone there that's trying to defend a clearly unsustainable product or process? And, you know, if it's the last, I'll be honest, I go into warrior mode. Not with the desire to put that person down or be rude to them or anything like that, but into a very even no-holds-barred stance about the facts of the case. I don't speak unless I know a lot of facts about anything to do with sustainability, actually. So, yes, there are different points of view, for sure. I have very strong points of view about what presents sustainable development and what does not. Always ready to talk.
Thank you. I'm going to read two questions in a row because they're very related to each other, and we have a lot of questions, but probably not enough time for all of them, so I'm going to speed through and see if we can get in as many as possible. Thank you for an interesting, important, and provocative presentation. My concern is that our young people have difficulty affording to support green directions. They already have difficulty finding jobs, and most of the jobs that are available demand that they move in the wrong directions. And the related question is, I am fortunate to teach some college nanotech classes in Washington and find it difficult to catch the attention of students to the past mistakes. Their loans are so huge that they need to make money. How to solve their current problems first, how to solve their current real problem first so they can focus on sustainability as the real now?
So that is an extremely compelling question, and it actually gets at the heart of the dynamic of how we either succeed or fail at promoting sustainability through education. So, for example, Carnegie Mellon, again, is in Pittsburgh, which is the epicenter of the Marcellus Shale deposit. And we are training, first of all, there's large amounts of money at a national lab called the National Energy Technology Lab in the South Hills of Pittsburgh to study gas-related issues. And so, of course, the university is right here. Why wouldn't it go and take that money? And so a lot of my colleagues are running big programs based on that support and are training young people to become basically gas men and gas women. And they leave here with master's degrees even into six-figure salaries. And we're a very expensive place to get educated at. So everything said there is exactly right. So that's somehow we have to escape that dynamic. Because quite literally, if we really do keep developing the Marcellus Shale deposit and everything like it, the future's over. We know that. We know the CO2 burden, the planet cannot accommodate the CO2 burdens, and we have huge amount of evidence saying that these CO2 burdens are conspiring against us in real time. So this requires, sustainability requires enormous amount of change. It's really frightening because you know, people, particularly when they get comfortable with one way or other of doing things, don't like to be told, no, we have to go and completely change. It's very, very hard to do. But we have to find a way to do that. And so to the teacher from Washington, I would simply say that keep trying. Keep trying to find ways to educate your students about sustainability and about the future, because when they're in your shoes, if you don't do this job to your best ability, when they're in your shoes, it's just going to be so much harder. As time gets on, it gets hard. You get more and more confined. The boundary conditions close in on you, on the civilization and on everybody in it, and it gets harder and harder, and eventually impossible to save ourselves. So I don't know if that's considered any sort of wisdom or anything. It is really hard, but it is inspiring. It is the center of everything beautiful and wonderful for the future, to actually figure out how to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, I have to say that it raises another issue, which is that, which I think you really raised in your presentation, but that I think we in general have to do a better job at, is that somehow over time the environment has become separated from economics and from other aspects, and it's really critical for us to understand that everything is really very connected, and that the economic aspects of living in the world are not separated from the environmental aspects, and that they all have impacts on each other, and that we can't just make separate silos out of all of these different things. Not that everybody has to learn and be an expert in every discipline, but to understand that there are facets that we have to recognize in all of the disciplines that we're doing.
Yes,
so let me see if I can.
I'll just make one more point about that, about the Washington question, and thank you for your insight, Ellen. You know, the question is, can we change? The answer is absolutely yes. If the sustainable technologies were actually valuable, and they can be, there's no question they can be, just the energy ones, for example. If they were, these students wouldn't have such a damned if you do, damned if you don't set of choices. And the way to do this is, our problem's a leadership problem. There's no question about it. It's a serious leadership problem. Our answer to this sort of a problem is to insist that the health and environmental implications of technologies are not economically externalized, that the polluter pays, as Prince Charles would put it. And so, you know, this, how you deal with, of course, you can't almost deal with this in a small college setting somewhere in the world, but by talking more and more about it, if we change the political dynamic, it is a political problem, to insist on the leadership we need, then this horrible set of choices the young people have become much easier.
I'm going to read 3 more questions that I have left, and you won't have time to answer them all in any depth, but maybe you can touch on all 3 really quickly. The first one is, hi Terry, what are the best graduate degrees for new BS chemistry graduates to pursue to advance sustainability? The second one is, will any measures such as the Index of Sustainable Economic Welfare gather traction? And the third one, a little more complex, asks, you said that renewables are market competitive. Do you mean now, or assuming that externalities one day become internalized? I hear all over that renewables are not market competitive yet in price scales, etc. And clean tech investors have been turned away because it has been a bust for the most part to date. Can you explain these conflicting messages?
Yeah, I think I can say something that at least to me sounds convincing. Germany.
And can you quickly mention maybe about the graduate degrees and the sustainability, economic welfare?
I'll just say a little bit more about that. I mean, Germany has found a way to do it. It's found a way to do it because it's faced the leadership crisis, and to a certain extent, and way more than the United States solved that leadership crisis. It's found ways to make renewables much more palatable. If you have a renewable energy producer, the German law says that the companies that sell energy have to buy renewables till there are none. Then they can go and buy non-renewables. Those sorts of things, just simple strokes of the pen, although very complex, of course, to bring about. Those sorts of things completely change the dynamic. Sorry, Lynn, what's the next question?
The other question was about the sustainable, the index. Do you think that a measure such as the index of sustainable economic welfare will gather traction?
So I don't know enough about it, and I think there's a lot of things coming up. The level of multidisciplinarity that it takes to actually produce any kind of reliable, i.e. pointing us the compass towards sustainability, the level of multidisciplinarity, when you get down into the details at least, the big picture things are pretty easy to see, but when you get down into the details, is demanding. But I'm sure it can be done. It's just and we're good at those kinds of problems actually, and some very good things are being produced and improved with time.
It's 3 o'clock on the hour, but I'm going to just see if you can squeeze in an answer to what are the best graduate degrees for new Bachelors of Science Chemistry graduates to pursue to advance sustainability.
Well, right now there's just not very many places that are doing a great job of sustainability education and chemistry departments. So it's more the place than the field, I think.
Well, with that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to draw the questions section to a close. I'm sorry that we were not able to get to all of the questions, although we did get one comment that in response to this last question, University of Wisconsin Extension offers an online master's degree in sustainable management. The chemistry student might Google this to check on one graduate option. And so I want to thank everybody for great participation in the discussion today. It was really wonderful, and Terry for a very stimulating and provocative discussion. I think we'll have you back soon to pursue this to add to this discussion and continue the discussion that we've been having today.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Terry.